On a map, World War II has clear, definitive end dates. In Europe, it was May 8, 1945, V-Day. In the Pacific, it was September 2nd, 1945, when Japan formally surrendered aboard the USS Missouri. But maps don't tell the whole story. In the vast, green silence of the Pacific's jungle-clad islands, time worked differently. For a scattered few, the war didn't end with a signature on a document. It didn't end at all. While the world rebuilt, forged new alliances, and launched satellites into space, these men were still fighting. They were the Japanese holdouts, soldiers of the Imperial Army and Navy who, either by being stranded, by choice, or by unwavering belief in their orders, never accepted the surrender. They lived for decades in a state of perpetual wartime, a reality constructed from memory, duty, and paranoia. Their stories are not just tales of survival. They are profound psychological dramas about the power of belief, the weight of indoctrination, and the terrifying human capacity to exist outside of time itself. They are the last ghosts of the Pacific War, and their eventual emergence in the 1970s provided the world with some of the most startling and poignant images of the 20th century. The most famous of these holdouts is Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, whose story we've touched on, but whose saga embodies the archetype. Onoda was an intelligence officer trained in guerrilla warfare and posted to Lubang Island in the Philippines in 1944. His orders were explicit: carry on guerrilla warfare, no matter what. He and 3 other soldiers retreated into the hills as American forces took the island. For them, every leaflet dropped from planes announcing Japan's surrender was an Allied trick. Every attempt by search parties or locals to contact them was a trap. They built a life in the jungle, surviving on bananas, coconuts, and stolen rice, occasionally raiding farms for supplies, actions they saw as legitimate guerrilla operations. As years turned into decades, Onoda's comrades died or surrendered, leaving him utterly alone after 1972. He became a myth, a bogeyman to the local Filipino community, and a persistent legend in Japan. What makes Onoda's case unique is the deliberate, almost scholarly way he maintained his war. He kept his uniform and rifle in pristine condition, documented his activities in a diary, and observed the coastline for the return of the Japanese fleet. His reality was a closed loop, reinforced by his training and his interpretation of every external event as deception. It took a chance encounter with a Japanese traveler, Norio Suzuki, and the eventual arrival of his former commanding officer to officially relieve him of duty in March 1974. Onoda's return to Japan was a media frenzy. He was a man from another age, physically in the 1970s, but psychologically frozen in 1944. He struggled with the modern world's noise, pace, and values, eventually finding a quieter life running a cattle ranch in Brazil. His story is the ultimate testament to the power of an order taken to its absolute, logical, and terrifying extreme. But Onoda was not the first to be found, nor was he the last. 2 years earlier, in January 1972, 2 local fishermen on the island of Guam stumbled upon a shocking sight near the Talafofo River. It was a man fishing with a handmade rod and net. His clothes were tattered, his hair long, but he moved with purpose. This was Sergeant Shoichi Yokoi. Yokoi had been a tailor in the Japanese army and was on Guam when it fell to U.S. forces in 1944. He and a few companions fled into the jungle. Unlike Onoda, Yokoi wasn't conducting a guerrilla war. He was in pure survival mode. He built an ingenious underground shelter reinforced with bamboo and reeds, complete with multiple exits. He fashioned clothes from tree bark, tools from scrap metal, and survived on a diet of nuts, fruits, frogs, eels, and rats. For 28 years, he lived in profound isolation, terrified of capture. He knew the war was likely over, but fear and shame kept him hidden. We Japanese soldiers were told to prefer death to the disgrace of getting captured alive. He set upon his discovery. His return was perhaps even more jarring than Onoda's. Yokoi was a humble enlisted man, not an officer driven by a code. His survival was a feat of incredible ingenuity and endurance, but his motivation was rooted in fear and a soldier's basic instinct to follow the last order he understood. Do not be captured. When he finally arrived back in Japan, he famously apologized for returning alive, a statement that spoke volumes about the psychological imprint of imperial military doctrine. The final, and in some ways most poignant, chapter of the Holdout saga closed in December 1974, just months after Onoda's surrender, on the remote island of Morotai. In Indonesia, this holdout was different. He was Private Teruo Nakamura, an indigenous Taiwanese soldier conscripted into the Japanese Imperial Army. Nakamura was part of a unit left behind on Morotai, and, like the others, took to the hills. He built a small hut in a secluded clearing and lived a solitary agrarian existence, cultivating a small plot of land. His case highlights another grim aspect of the war. The colonial conscripts, who were often abandoned and forgotten. When a pilot spotted his hut from the air, an Indonesian military team was sent to retrieve him. The encounter was tense. Nakamura, believing they were enemies, fought with a spear before being subdued. His surrender was not a ceremonial relief of duty like Onoda's, but a physical capture, and when he returned, his reception was muted, compared to the hero's welcomes for Onoda and Yokoi. As a Taiwanese native, his story was caught in the complex politics of post-war East Asia. He died of lung cancer just a few years later. Nakamura's story is a quieter, Sadar, coda, a reminder that for every famous holdout, there may have been others who lived and died in silence, never knowing the war had ended. The phenomenon of the Japanese holdouts forces us to ask difficult questions. Were they heroes, embodying the ultimate loyalty and perseverance, or were they tragic victims of a military culture that valued obedience over reason, and of a psychological conditioning so powerful it could override decades of evidence? The answer is likely both. They were products of the Shinjinkan, the Japanese military code that forbade surrender as the ultimate dishonor. In their minds, to accept the peace leaflets was to betray their comrades, who had died their emperor, and their very identity as soldiers. The jungle became both their sanctuary and their prison, a place where their wartime reality could be preserved intact. Their eventual return was not just a news story. It was a time capsule opening, offering a raw, unfiltered look at the spirit of Imperial Japan, a spirit, the modernized pacifist. Japan of the 1970s had worked hard to leave behind. They were living anachronisms, and their integration into a world of jet planes, television, and economic miracles was a profound challenge. The holdouts teach us that the end of a war is a political and military event, but for the individual soldier, the war only ends when the mind believes it has ended. For these men, that belief was delayed by 30 years, a delay that turned them into legends, tragedies, and permanent, haunting questions about the price of duty in the long shadow of war.